The Royal Crest Hotel wasn't just another five-star retreat. It was a kingdom of polished marble, golden chandeliers, and people who measured worth not by kindness, but by the clothes on your back. Guests moved like they belonged to another world, a world that didn't have room for mistakes or mercy. And on that quiet afternoon, under the crystal glow of the lobby lights, a boy walked in who didn't quite fit that world. David Washington, only 12 years old, stepped through the revolving doors carrying a simple backpack and holding a small black credit card. His clothes were neat but ordinary, a plain hoodie, clean sneakers, the kind of outfit that made him invisible in places like this. But that afternoon, invisibility was not an option. Behind the front desk stood Kevin Martinez, the hotel's proud and polished front manager. His suit was crisp, his smile rehearsed, and his ego as large as the chandelier above his head. The kind of man who loved being in control, especially when it came to people he thought were beneath him. Kevin glanced at the boy and raised a brow. "Can I help you, kid?" "The arcade's 2 blocks down." David didn't flinch. His voice was calm, polite. "I'm here to check in. The presidential suite, please." For a moment, Kevin just stared. Then he laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that drew the attention of several guests in the lobby. "You're checking into what?" he said, emphasizing each word as though it were a joke he was letting everyone in on. "Son, that room costs $40,000 a night." David simply nodded. "That's right." The smirk on Kevin's face widened. He turned toward his assistant, Lisa, a woman with decades of hotel experience and enough wisdom to know disaster when she saw it. "Lisa," Kevin said loudly so the entire lobby could hear, "get this young man a menu for the coffee shop next door. He must have wandered in here by mistake." A few guests chuckled softly. Someone whispered, "Kids these days," but David didn't move. He took a quiet breath and laid the black credit card on the marble counter. "Please," he said softly. "Run the payment." Kevin stared at the card for a moment. Black, shiny, elegant, the kind of card that could open doors or close them. But arrogance blinded him. He crossed his arms. "You know what this is, kid?" he said, tapping the counter. "This is a black card. It's not something you just find lying around. People who own these, well, they don't walk in wearing $10 sneakers." Lisa's expression shifted, worry flashing in her eyes. "Kevin," she whispered, "maybe let me handle this." But he cut her off. "I said I've got it." David said nothing. He simply looked at Kevin with a calmness that made the manager strangely uneasy, like he was standing in front of a storm he didn't see coming. Then, slowly, David pushed the card toward him. "Go ahead," he said. Kevin hesitated for a second before snatching it up. His hand was slightly slick with sweat, though he'd never admit it. As he walked toward the payment terminal, something strange happened. The lobby grew quiet. Conversations faded, footsteps slowed. Even the pianist in the corner seemed to stop mid-note. It was as if everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. Kevin held the black card like a live wire. He slid it into the terminal with unnecessary force, muttering under his breath, "Let's get this over with." Lisa stood behind him, biting her lip. "Kevin, you really should let me. I said I'm fine," he snapped, his voice cracking slightly. The machine beeped. Kevin entered the amount, $40,000. But his fingers were trembling so much that he mistyped twice. He cursed quietly and re-entered the numbers. Beep, beep. The screen blinked. Processing. And in that suspended silence, where even the air seemed to hold its breath, David stood motionless, his eyes calm, his expression unreadable. Seconds felt like hours. Then it happened. A soft tone, a green light. And on the screen appeared a message that made Kevin's stomach drop to the floor. Transaction approved. Available balance, $15,247,891.33. For a full moment, Kevin just stared at the numbers. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and read them again. It couldn't be. 15 million? His face went pale. Lisa leaned over his shoulder. When she saw the amount, her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, my God," she whispered. The silence in the lobby shattered into murmurs. Guests began whispering, gasping. glancing at the boy they had laughed at moments ago. David didn't move. He didn't smile. He simply looked at Kevin, who now looked like a man watching his entire reputation crumble in real time. That has to be a system error, Kevin muttered weakly. A glitch. David tilted his head slightly. You can call Zurich International Bank if you'd like to confirm, he said quietly. The mention of that name froze Kevin where he stood. Everyone knew Zurich's reputation, a private institution serving only the wealthiest individuals in the world. Lisa stepped back, already realizing what this meant. Her voice trembled as she said, "Kevin, stop. Just stop!" But it was too late. David's quiet dignity had turned the tables completely. And now the same man who had mocked him minutes earlier stood shaking, humiliated before his peers and his guests. The crowd began whispering louder now, their words like tiny knives cutting through the air. 15 million? He's a child! The manager humiliated him in front of everyone. Kevin's breathing quickened. His hands trembled. He turned toward David, his voice small, desperate. "Listen, I didn't know, okay? If I had known that you were—" David interrupted softly, his tone even. "Wealthy?" Kevin froze. "So you only treat people with respect when they have money?" The question echoed through the marble lobby, heavy as judgment. No one spoke, not even Lisa. Kevin's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. David picked up his card and slid it back into his wallet, his eyes never leaving Kevin's. "You made a promise," he said calmly. "You said if I could pay, you'd personally carry my bags. Do you still intend to keep your word?" The silence that followed was unbearable. The same man who had laughed at a child was now trembling under the weight of his own arrogance. Every eye in the lobby was on him, watching him fall apart. Kevin looked around for help, for anyone to speak up for him. But the room had turned against him completely. Even his own employees stepped back, avoiding his gaze. I didn't mean to," he began. But David was already turning away, his quiet dignity radiating louder than any insult ever could. That moment, that single, silent reversal, was more powerful than any argument, any fight, any revenge. Because in a world obsessed with status, David Washington had just reminded everyone in that room that true power never raises its voice. It simply waits and lets arrogance destroy itself. The sound of the payment terminal still echoed in Kevin's mind, a sound he would never forget. Transaction approved. $15 million. The laughter that had once filled the Royal Crest Hotel's grand lobby was gone, replaced by whispers that carried disbelief and shame. Every guest who had smirked or chuckled now stood frozen, eyes darting between the boy and the manager who had mocked him. For Kevin Martinez, it felt as though the marble floor had opened beneath him. His polished confidence was gone, stripped away in front of his entire staff. He tried to speak, but his voice betrayed him, weak, trembling. This must be some kind of mistake. David stood calm and composed, the same quiet energy that had unnerved Kevin earlier now radiating stronger than ever. His voice was soft, but it sliced through the silence. "Would you like to call the bank and confirm the balance yourself?" Kevin's throat tightened. The words Zurich International Bank still hung heavy in the air, a name that meant power, wealth, exclusivity. The kind of bank where clients weren't just rich, they were untouchable. Lisa, still standing a few steps away, looked at Kevin with pity. She had warned him. She had felt this coming. Now it was too late. "Kevin," she whispered urgently, "stop talking, please. Just stop." But Kevin was already spiraling. He turned back to David, desperate to salvage what little dignity he had left. "Listen, kid," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "If I had known you were—" Obviously I would have—" David interrupted quietly. "Would have treated me better?" The question hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Kevin swallowed hard, but no words came. David's eyes, calm and unblinking, stayed fixed on him. "So respect," he continued softly, "depends on money?" You could have heard a pin drop in that lobby. Guests looked down in shame. Others stared at the manager, their faces twisted with disgust. Kevin's hands twitched at his sides. No, that's not what I meant. But the truth was already exposed. There was nothing left to defend. And then, without raising his voice, David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Dr. Morrison," he said into the speaker, "are you available?" A calm, measured voice answered. "Always, David. What's happened this time?" The lawyer's voice echoed through the marble hall. Clear and precise, David turned the speaker on, his gaze still fixed on Kevin. "The hotel manager just accused me of theft. Publicly. He mocked my appearance and laughed at me in front of other guests. I'd like your opinion on that." A heavy pause followed. Then Dr. Morrison spoke again, his tone sharp and cutting, the voice of authority itself. "That would qualify as racial discrimination, public humiliation of a minor, and possibly defamation. Both the employee and the establishment could face severe legal consequences." Kevin's breath hitched. His entire body went rigid. Wait, hold on. "That's not necessary." Dr. Morrison's voice didn't waver. "David, given the balance in your account, I imagine Zurich's legal division would be very interested in addressing this matter." The color drained from Kevin's face. Lisa closed her eyes, whispering under her breath, "Oh, Kevin." David stayed silent. He didn't need to say a word. The truth was doing all the work for him. Guests began murmuring again, not in laughter this time, but in sympathy and outrage. One woman whispered to her husband, "He humiliated that boy. And now look at him." Another voice added, "Serves him right. Arrogance always comes back around." Kevin looked around, desperate now, eyes pleading. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean it like that. I have a family. I can't lose my job over this." David tilted his head, his voice quiet and steady. "When you embarrassed me, did you think about my family? When you laughed, did you think I had feelings?" Kevin blinked rapidly, eyes filling with tears he didn't want anyone to see, but there was no mercy in the crowd, only silence and judgment. And then, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. A man in a dark tailored suit stepped out, James Richardson, the general manager of the Royal Crest. His steps were firm, his expression thunderous. He had clearly been called in a hurry. He looked around once, taking in the scene. The crowd, the silence, Kevin's trembling hands, and the young boy standing tall in the center of it all. "Mr. Martinez," he said sharply, his voice echoing like a command. "My office, now!" Kevin froze. "Sir, Now!" Richardson barked. Then, turning to David, his voice softened instantly, shifting from authority to respect. "Mr. Washington, I am deeply sorry for this entire incident. This behavior is unacceptable, and there will be immediate consequences." Kevin's knees nearly buckled. He could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes watching him fall from grace. David simply nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I appreciate your professionalism." The general manager gestured toward the staff. "Escort Mr. Martinez to my office." 2 security officers stepped forward. Kevin's face went blank, numb. He glanced at David one last time, his lips trembling. "Please." "I didn't mean to," but David only watched, calm and unshaken. His silence was more powerful than any insult, any curse, any revenge could ever be. As Kevin was led away, his polished shoes squeaking on the marble, whispers followed him like shadows. The man who had once ruled the lobby now left it in disgrace, his pride shattered, his reputation in ruins. David remained standing where he was, surrounded by stunned onlookers. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just breathed in quietly, as if the entire ordeal had never been about revenge, but about balance, about justice. Lisa approached him softly. "Mr. Washington," she said gently, "I'm so sorry for what happened." "I hope you'll allow me to personally assist with your check-in." David gave a small nod. "Thank you, Ms. Lisa. That would be fine." As she completed the paperwork, her hands still trembling slightly, David turned to look at the crowd. The same people who had doubted him were now looking at him with something close to admiration. He didn't need their apology. Their silence was enough, and as the elevator doors closed behind him, taking him to the suite that had started all of this, every person in that lobby knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable, a lesson carved deep into the heart of arrogance. That day, they learned that humility costs nothing, but pride can cost everything. The sun was setting over the city, but for Kevin Martinez, the night had already begun. Inside the manager's office, the silence was thick enough to choke on. His tie was loosened, his hands shaking as they rested on the table. The man who once strutted across the lobby like a king now sat like a prisoner awaiting judgment. Across from him stood James Richardson, the general manager, tall, calm, and cold. "Kevin," he began, voice level but laced with disappointment. "I've reviewed the footage. I've listened to the witness statements. What you did wasn't just unprofessional, it was inhumane." Kevin swallowed hard. "Sir, please, I didn't know who he was." Richardson cut him off sharply. "That's the point, Kevin. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with decency." Kevin looked down at his trembling hands. "I've worked here for 12 years, he whispered. "This job, it's all I have." The general manager sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "You've had 12 years to learn compassion, but you chose arrogance instead." A long pause. The sound of a ticking wall clock filled the silence. Then, with quiet finality, Richardson slid a form across the desk. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Kevin's chest tightened. His eyes blurred. "Please, sir, I have 2 kids. My wife—" Richardson looked at him not with anger, but with something colder. Pity. "You should have thought about that before humiliating someone's son." Kevin's head dropped. A single tear slid down his cheek, landing on the termination letter. Cut to Kevin walking through the back exit of the hotel. The air outside is cold, heavy. His ID badge dangles uselessly from his fingers. The world moves around him. Taxis, laughter, city lights. But he feels invisible. Narrator. The same doors that once opened for him with respect now watched him leave in disgrace. He didn't even notice when the rain started to fall. Scene shift. Hotel's top suite. The music softens, now gentle and reflective. David Washington stood by the window of his penthouse, gazing out at the city below. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. His reflection in the glass looked older than 15, calm, wise, burdened. Behind him, Lisa entered quietly with a tray of tea. "Mr. Washington," she said softly, "everything's been arranged. The hotel board has issued a public apology on behalf of the staff. Mr. Richardson asked if you'd consider accepting it." David turned slowly. "An apology?" he repeated, not with anger, but thought. "People make mistakes. The problem isn't the apology. It's the reason they forget to care until it's too late." Lisa nodded slowly. "You're right. But what you did today, it opened a lot of eyes." David smiled faintly, not out of pride, but peace. "Sometimes," he said, "you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You just have to stay calm long enough for the truth to speak for itself." Camera pans to the window. Rain streaking the glass, city lights glowing in the distance. Cut to a week later, early morning. Kevin sits on a park bench holding a newspaper. The headline reads, "Teenage heir to multinational fund teaches hotel staff a lesson in humanity." He stares at it in silence. His eyes move over the photo. David, standing with his mother, smiling faintly for the camera. Kevin's hands tighten on the paper. The guilt in his chest is suffocating. He remembers his own son, 14, shy and quiet, who often asked why adults treated some people better than others. And now, for the first time, Kevin finally had an answer. A slow piano melody begins. Sorrowful. Redemptive. Narrator. Sometimes life doesn't destroy us out of cruelty. Sometimes it humbles us to rebuild us. Kevin folded the newspaper carefully, stood up, and looked toward the horizon. His clothes were wrinkled, his shoes scuffed, but his eyes carried something new, understanding. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer. "Never again." Cut to the hotel 1 month later. The Royal Crest was busier than ever. Guests came and went, unaware of the story that had changed the soul of the building. Lisa, now promoted to assistant manager, was leading a new staff training session. She stood in front of a small group of young employees, her voice confident, her tone kind. Before you ask someone who they are, she said, ask yourself how you'd treat them if you didn't know. Because character isn't shown in how we serve the rich. It's in how we serve the ones who can't fight back. The staff nodded. Taking notes, listening closely, at the back of the room, unnoticed, David listened quietly, a faint smile on his lips. He didn't need recognition. The lesson had already taken root. Camera pans out. The hotel lobby below, glowing golden in the afternoon sun. Guests move gracefully, laughter echoes, and peace returns to the place that once witnessed cruelty. Narrator, gentle, fading voice. And so, the boy they mocked became the voice that changed them. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with grace and the quiet power of truth. Because in the end, respect isn't earned by wealth or titles. It's earned by how we make others feel when no one is watching.